Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Even if we can't be in the same room, I'm still so excited to help you all learn about how incredible birds are. So welcome to our virtual program. Today, we're going to be focusing on the habitats that birds use, as well as learning what makes birds unique. So my name is Sarah Doxson, and I am an environmental educator with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. So my job is to help people learn about the world around us, and especially birds. So at Bird Conservancy, we love all animals, but of course, as you might have guessed from our name, we especially love birds. So our job here is to help conserve or protect birds and their habitats. We do that by studying birds, making the land and water healthier, and like I'm doing right now, teaching people just like you about why birds are so cool. So today, what are we going to learn? We are going to learn about different habitats, what characteristics are specific to birds, how these characteristics help birds survive in their habitats, and how to apply these adaptations to create our own habitats and birds. So first of all, what is a habitat? I mentioned that our mission at Bird Conservancy is to help conserve or protect birds and their habitats. So what does that mean? Well, a habitat is simply the place where something lives, and everything, including us, needs a healthy habitat in order to survive. And there are four main things that we need in our habitat. So think about yourself. What are some things that you need to survive? And if you are in a classroom, you can raise your hand. If you're watching online and can use a chat box, do that, or you can just think about it in your brain. I know the first thing I usually think of is food. So we all need food, whether you are a plant or an animal, we need some sort of food in our habitat. We also need water. I love to drink water. It makes me feel really, really good. We also need shelter, right? If there is a storm outside or if it's really hot, we need a place to take shelter where we can be safe, and animals need the same thing. And we also need space. So for example, what if I put 15 giraffes in your bedroom? That would be kind of cool for a little bit, but man, you would need a lot more space, right? That would get really crowded really quickly. So we need lots of space to make sure that we are comfortable and happy. And I like to do hand motions to help me remember these four components of a habitat. So for food, we can rub our belly like we're hungry. For water, you can pretend like you're taking a drink. For shelter, put your hands over your head like a roof. And then for space, you can wave your arms around. We need lots of space to run around. Excellent. All right, so in a habitat, we need food, water, shelter, and space. So let's think about different kinds of habitats. So all over the world, there are lots and lots of different kinds of habitats. So we could have a forest, or a desert is another kind of habitat. Here are the grasslands. We have lots of this in Colorado. We could also call it the prairie. Or an ocean, that's another type of habitat. Lots of cool places all over the world. So now that we know what a habitat is, the place where something lives, let's look at some birds that might live in these different habitats. Well, they probably won't live in an ocean, but the other ones they would certainly live in. So look at this bird. What are some things that you notice? Does anyone know what kind of bird it might be? And again, if you're in a classroom, you can raise your hand to take a guess or type in the chat box if that's available, or just think about it in your head. So this bird is a red-tailed hawk, and you have probably seen them flying around. They are pretty common, and they love to soar around in the sky. And of course, they have, like their name says, this really cool rusty red tail. And when I look at this red-tailed hawk, I notice it has a really hooked, sharp beak. And it has talons to match. Look at how big its feet are, and there are some really sharp talons or claws at the end. And I also noticed that it has really big eyes. So if it has a sharp hooked beak and really sharp talons, really big eyes, what do you think this bird might be really good at doing? What is it adapted for? Yeah, this bird is adapted for hunting. Red-tailed hawks are predators, so they need their hooked beak and talons and large eyes to be able to soar high in the sky and see things like rabbits or mice. And then their beak and their talons kind of act like their knife and fork, so it helps them to eat their prey. All right, let's take a look at another one. Ooh, these are my favorite. Okay, so what do you notice about this bird? And this is a hummingbird. Isn't it so beautiful? What do you notice that is the same about our hawk? What's different? So I notice that this hummingbird has a really long pointed beak. So our red-tailed hawk, it was curved and pointy and kind of short, I guess. But this beak is really long. I also notice it has a beautiful pink throat. That's so cool. And it's flapping its wings so fast that we can barely see them in the photo. So it has really fast wing beats. So how could these adaptations be useful to this hummingbird? What do you think? What does it use that long beak for? Why do its wings need to move so fast? So hummingbirds love to eat nectar from flowers. So their beak helps them to reach into flowers that might be really long. So they can reach their beak in there, and then they have a really long tongue, and they kind of lap up the nectar just like a dog or a cat drinking water. It's really neat. And they need to be able, since flowers aren't very strong, they can't land and sit on a flower. So they need to be able to flap their wings really, really fast so that they can hover above the flower. And that bright pink throat, this is a male hummingbird, and that helps him to attract a mate. So those are some adaptations that help this hummingbird survive. Okay, here's our last one. This is a super cool bird. So this is a grosbeak, and I notice it has a really thick beak. Look how big its beak is. And also, it's really brightly colored. There aren't very many birds that are this bright blue. And I also noticed that it's perched, so it's kind of standing on this branch here. So grosbeaks are seed eaters, so they use that thick beak to have enough strength to crack open nuts and seeds. And they like to sit perched on branches so that they can kind of move along the branches to find those nuts and seeds. Okay, so why do you think that all of these birds look different? Why aren't they all the same? Why can't they all have the same type of beak or the same colors and things like that? Why are these birds different? That's right. So they all have different adaptations to help them survive in different kinds of habitats. Because what do you think would happen if all birds only lived in forests and they only ate insects? So all the birds in the world, they only live in forests, all they eat is insects. What would happen? They would run out of food and space really quickly. And then they wouldn't be able to survive because they would no longer have a healthy habitat. There wouldn't be enough food or space. So think about the last bird you saw. Maybe it was on TV, or you saw a picture, or maybe you saw a real bird outside. What did it look like? What do you think makes a bird a bird? Like, how do we know is a bird is not a squirrel or a moose? What are some adaptations that make birds unique? So, birds have feathers. That's probably the most unique thing about birds. No other kinds of animals have feathers. And feathers help birds do all sorts of different things. They are warm-blooded, just like us. Something that is cold-blooded would be something like a snake or a lizard. So birds are warm-blooded. They're able to regulate their own body temperature. They have hollow bones. Think about what hollow bones would help us to do, or help birds to do, rather. They have talons. So some birds, like the hawk that we saw, have really, really sharp talons to help them hunt. Other birds, like the grosbeak, they just kind of have toes, and they do have little claws on their toes, but they use them more for hanging on. They don't really use them for hunting or anything like that. They have wings, of course, and all birds have wings, but not all birds fly. Most of them have a tail that helps them to fly or be balanced when they're perching. And they lay eggs. That's another pretty unique thing. What else can you think of? This seems like a pretty good list, but if you have other ideas of what makes a bird, go ahead and share those too. Okay, so I've mentioned this word, adaptation, a few times, but what exactly is it? We've been talking about it, so think about if you can come up with a definition of what an adaptation is. So an adaptation is a physical or behavioral characteristic that better helps an animal to survive in its environment. So it could be the way an animal looks, or it could be the way it behaves. So for example, the sharp hooked beak of the red-tailed hawk, that is an adaptation because it helps them to eat meat. Or say, have you ever seen a pelican before? They have webbed feet. And so their webbed feet are an adaptation or a physical characteristic that helps them to swim. So that helps them to survive in their lake habitat. And a behavioral adaptation would be something like migration. So some animals need to move from one place to another in order to find enough food. Or some animals might hibernate. So those are some behavioral characteristics or adaptations. All right, so now we've learned all about habitats and what a habitat is, and we've learned about adaptations that birds have. So we're going to give you some time to be creative now. So you're going to need a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil, crayons, markers, colored pencils, if you have those around, and some curiosity. If you don't have these right with you, go ahead and hit pause and then come back whenever you're ready. All right, So the first thing you're going to do is create your, a dream habitat for a bird, okay? So remember, we need food, water, shelter, and space in order for our bird to survive. So think about a bird. It could be a real bird. It could be a bird you make up in your imagination, but think about where that bird would love to live. So again, hit pause, take 5 or 10 minutes or however much time you need to create your bird's dream habitat, and then come back whenever you're ready. Have fun. All right, so now that we have our habitats created, we are going to create a bird that lives in that habitat. And make sure that you include all the adaptations it needs to survive. So, for example, if your bird eats nuts and seeds, could it have a sharp hooked beak like a hawk? Or a flat beak like a duck? Probably not. It would need a really thick kind of triangle shaped beak like the grosbeak we saw. And like I said, you can be as silly and creative as you want. Maybe you want a rainbow colored bird, and that means it has to have a rainbow habitat so it can camouflage. Or maybe you want to draw a space hawk and it lives in outer space. So what kind of adaptations would it need to live in outer space? So again, think about where the bird builds its nest, what's it going to eat, how does it get away from predators? Is it a male or a female? Where does it get its water? So be sure to include all of those things. And again, hit pause and come back whenever you are done creating your bird. All right, I'm sure you all have created some amazing habitats and birds to go along with them. Thank you so much for learning with us today. If you have any questions at all, you can always ask a grown-up to help you research them in a book or maybe do a search online. You can also always email us at Bird Conservancy and we can point you in the right direction. Before we go though, I have a challenge for you. So your challenge is to share what you learned today with your parents or a cousin or friend, even your pet. They might want to learn about what you learned today. And then see if you can find different birds in your neighborhood and figure out what their adaptations are that help them to survive in their habitat. What do they eat? Where do they get water? What do they use for shelter? And do you think they need a lot or a little space? So thank you again. Be sure to keep in touch with us here at Bird Conservancy. You can find other cool programs that we're doing on our Facebook page or website. And like I said, if you have questions, please email us at education@birdconservancy.org. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and keep looking for birds.